Hey everybody, welcome to episode 25 of Making It. I'm Bob Clagett. I'm here with David Picciuto and Jimmy Diresta. What's up, guys?
Howdy, howdy.
25, wow.
I know.
That was quick.
I want to thank today's sponsor, Inventables, who are an awesome company that they make all sorts of stuff. They sell all sorts of stuff for you to use in your projects. They sell 3D carving machines, lots of tools, lots of parts. And it's pretty crazy. You can go there and you can find, aluminum extrusions. If you want to make some sort of crazy machine, you can find motors and gears. And then they have like conductive foam and glow in the dark this and glow in the dark that. It's all sorts of stuff.
You know what they have too? And I just used it. You just reminded me. They have printing blocks. So you can on your CNC machine, you can make a printing block. And I just printed a bunch of product logos for a company, and I left the trademark out, the registered mark. Can you guys see that on my hand? So I actually CNC'd a little registered mark in one of their printing blocks. It's like the size of an eraser. So I can go back in, because I left it out of the silk screen, so I can go back in and just rubber stamp it into the product.
Oh, nice.
I did at Maker Faire a couple of years ago, last year maybe. I actually made a bunch of stamps and set them up by the CNC, and kids could come by and like stamp books and stuff with them. It worked out really well. So
I just ordered those little soldering things. I don't know what they're called.
Oh, the sleeves.
Yeah, because I am terrible at soldering, and this is
explain what those are for anybody listening.
So instead of twisting some wires and putting some solder on there, what you do is it's a little sleeve, 2 open ends, and you stick a wire in each end, and you just heat it up with a lighter, and you're good to go. And I think there's some sort of solder in there, and when you heat it up with the lighter, it melts. And
wow, that's a cool idea. I never saw those.
Going to use those on the guitar. So
awesome. Yeah. So go to inventables.com, check them out, tell them we said hi and that we sent you over there. Stuff.
Yep.
So what's everybody working on? Are you working on the guitar? Tell us more about the guitar.
Yes. I ran into some technical issues, so we're going to resume the guitar build probably next week. So it's not done yet, and it's going to be a 2 video process. I don't normally like doing multi-part videos, because if you don't like the first one, you're definitely not going to watch the second one. But I'm going to make this 2 separate. So there's going to be the CNC part of the body, and I think I'm going to do a full video on just finishing the guitar, painting it with rattle cans, and then actually buffing it out with like a car buffer and the process there. And the reason I'm going to separate into 2 videos is because the other one is going to actually take like a week to do with the multiple coats of finish and everything. So.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about doing refinishing a guitar, an old guitar, at some point for a video too, because I did one several years ago and it turned out really, really well. And it was it was like a sunburst, like kind of a honey sunburst, and so there's several layers of color that you have to spray on, and they overlap and stuff. So is that why why it would take so long for yours? You doing something like that? I'm not going to do the sunburst. I'm just going to do the solid color. But gotcha. Each coat of lacquer needs to dry for a full 24 hours, and then buffed, and then reapplied. And there's coats of lacquer before the paint is what I'm reading. So it's a long, boring process. Gotcha.
And you could wet sand in between if you need to.
And that's exactly what we'll be doing.
Yeah.
So
cool. And what am I working on? I'm working on a couple of behind the scenes things, kind of boring stuff. So I did a set of shelves this week, which I wouldn't do a video on. And I'm also doing like a 20-foot long trade show wall, which I am also not doing a video on. But if anybody follows me on Snapchat, I sometimes do a little behind the scenes thing in the shop, and I just talk about things that you otherwise won't see anywhere else. So if anybody's curious to find me on Snapchat, it's just my name, Jimmy Diresta. And when I remember I have the app installed on my phone, I go and I do a flurry of things. And then like 2 weeks will go by and I'll completely forget about it. And then I'm like, oh, I should Snapchat. And so then I do like a bunch of kind of interesting things. So I'm trying to do that more. And then what else? So I built a set of shelves this week for the George Dickel truck bed thing. So that's moving along. And then my video, which you may have seen by now if you're listening, because it'll be airing Thursday, which is tomorrow. I did my Leatherman mod, which I made a new one. And so I made a quick video. It's only a 5-minute video, but it shows a couple of interesting techniques as far as welding and cutting metal and bending metal. And so I did that. That's going to be on Make tomorrow. So that was a quick little video. No tips video this week because David's on hiatus in Syracuse working on a job that he got with his dad. So Dave's out of the city for a couple of weeks. So until he gets back, I probably won't do a tips video. But that's it.
Gotcha.
I'm looking forward to the video on the Leatherman mod because in the photo, and some people commented, it looks like you can't open it up the way it is, and so I'm very curious.
It's like it just opens like that.
Oh,
see that?
Yeah.
I'm showing the guys on camera how it works.
Clever.
And it's dead simple. The reason I thought it would be provocative if I didn't explain how it works. So that's why I just put the picture up because I got a shot and I'm like, oh wow, you can't even see that. So I'm like, I left it out. So
interesting. Right. Well, if nobody has seen it yet, go watch the video. That's pretty clever.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was fun.
As far as me, I'm doing shelves as well. I did a set of like wooden shelves, but they're built into a brick inset, and so they're kind of floating within brick. So
that's easy to do. I've done that a few times because you could make the cut a little bit snug and hammer it in. Did you do that?
Yeah. Well, I just had to force it in, but yeah.
Yeah.
I did that last week, and then I'm actually doing another floating shelf of a different type for some friends of mine who just had a baby. So I'm doing one for his room, but it's an entirely different type of build. So I'm doing a video for both of them, but I think I'm going to end up having 2 shelf videos within a couple weeks of each other, probably. But they're hung differently, they're constructed differently, they look totally different stuff. So do that.
Cool.
And then I did my first kind of vlog type video this week, and that was all of Monday. It was kind of cool because that was started Monday morning, finished at 5:00 on Monday. It was online and kind of done. So it was a kind of a new experience to do something completely in one day for me.
Yeah, it was funny in that video. You said I think you looked at the clock and you go, okay, it's 1:00 and I still haven't done one thing today. I say that to myself every day. I look at the clock. I'm like, okay, it's 11:00 and I haven't built something yet. And I'm getting anxious. If it's noon or 1:00, I start getting really anxious and I haven't actually cut a piece of wood or glued something together. Because for me, that means progress.
Yeah.
That physical action.
It's kind of the same way. And that's what I was thinking. But then, somebody actually left a comment saying something like, well, actually, you have been doing work. It's just a different kind of work than what you're used to doing. And that makes sense. It's just a really different, look at productivity when you think about like producing a piece of media versus like being in the shop and producing a thing. So,
yeah, it's funny because I get anxiety when I don't have the material because then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I don't have the material. I need to do this thing. And so the behind the scenes and that non-physical stuff of like making the phone call, ordering the material, trying to pay for it, all that sucks up the day.
Yeah.
But once I actually do that, like I'm doing a project now with brick face. It's going to be a facade of a sign is going to be brick face. And that's been lingering. And I couldn't start on that sign because I don't have a sheet of faux brick face. And I finally ordered one from a theatrical company in New Jersey. So they're going to send me a sheet of phony brick face just to make the signage. And but once I got off the phone and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, that'll appear Monday in my shop. They're going to deliver it and then I can get to work. But that mental anxiety of knowing I need material that I otherwise can't just go and get at the hardware store, even though that's not physical work, it also is mentally taxing.
Yeah.
Knowing you need something that's not a simple get. I guess that's the point of my story.
That's why I like Amazon Prime so much. 2 days.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so funny. I got to consider using that more often because Danny, my supervisor at my high school job, he always orders things off of Amazon. I'll say, oh, you can't get that. And he's like, on the keyboard, he's like, it's here. I'm like, all right, then order it there. I forgot.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I forgot. I always forget to use it as a resource because I don't realize it's available on that stuff as much as it is. For instance,
Amazon's always my first thought.
Me too.
I have to start. I mean, I'm still living in the 80s, so I got to catch up.
So, Bob, what's the plan with the vlog? How often? Is there a schedule?
No, there's not a schedule. I'm not really sure. I think I want them to be interesting enough, not just like filler. So I don't think I'm going to do a schedule now. I think I'm going to kind of save the motivation there for when there's something happening that I think is worthwhile talking about,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'm going to do them on a real regular basis, but I'm going to try to keep my mind open for subjects that would be interesting enough to do, So it's not really a good answer, but that's, kind of the way I'm looking at it now. Because I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to do it just to look at the camera and talk any more than I have to, that type of stuff. But if there's something that I'm doing that I think would be worthwhile sharing, then I'll try to capture it.
Nice.
Did you ask the guys at the makerspace you met with if you could videotape them, and did they say no, or did you not think of it because you just didn't want to be intrusive?
No, I didn't really ask them. I just didn't think of it because it was kind of a quick meeting, and they were explaining what they were doing and everything, and it just there's not enough there to show yet. I think it's going to be a really awesome space, but they had the keys maybe that day or the day before to the space,
Right.
So it's just getting started. So
Okay.
once it gets more up and running, I'm going to be doing some probably teaching there a little bit and like helping out, and then so we'll do some stuff and actually we talked about possibly me doing a project video in their build out, like making them some tables, like some working tables that will have like fold down vices and rolling tables that'll lock together to make big tables and stuff like that. So I may end up doing a project video there and be able to introduce the whole makerspace through something like that. So
Very cool.
it's cool. I'm excited about it. I'm excited for them. Two guys that were like, one of them's a teacher, the other worked at the college that I went to and kind of led the industrial design lab. And they both just, left their jobs to go try to make this thing for people to use. And it's really cool. It's cool to see them doing that and making that jump. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to introduce a topic this week. All three of us, in one way or another, sort of got hit up with this topic, and I'm going to talk for a second about how I got hit up with this topic. William Lutz is a great fan of ours and a new friend, and he wrote on one of my comments this week. He said, "Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once they grow up," and that's a Pablo Picasso quote. And William associated that with me, so thank you for that. And then, David, talk a little bit about your experience with being a child this week.
Oh man! Over the weekend, Kelly and I went to the Toledo Museum of Art, and a buddy of mine was speaking on a panel. He makes this magazine that they put out once a year, and the topic of this panel was play, and the topic of his magazine was play. That he gets a bunch of artists, he curates a bunch of artists, and they submit art for this magazine. And so the panel was all about play, and for them it was play in their art. And then my wife and I were talking, and she's like, that'd be a great topic for the podcast because play is just so important in having fun. And so I haven't really thought too much about this, but I always try to have I try to have fun in my videos and when I'm teaching. I think the last video that I just made, which was paper making and then printing photos on some homemade paper, I think that goes right along with this play. So it's just, it's one of those childhood things that I got to do in junior high. And now I'm figuring out how to have fun with it as a 40-year-old adult. So
yeah, the idea of keeping that childlike playfulness in our everyday work is really important, and I'm really good at it because I spent 20 years in the toy business and playing with toys, and literally like there's the funny scene from the Tom Hanks movie Big, where he's the kid in a meeting, but they don't know him as a kid; they think he's an adult, but he's playing with the building, and he's like, I don't get it. It's a building that turns into a robot. I don't really get it. Like, and that's a real kid's perspective in that meeting, and all those people were so uptight that you could see how they all lost that childhood playfulness and their ability to just literally be playful. And so that's such a funny scene that I could identify with, because every time I was ever in a toy meeting, even before I saw that movie, it was the same thing. It was just like immediately playing with something, like we open the box, immediately tear apart and play at it. So, and that's the sense that I've been able to keep with a lot of the tools that I get now, because the minute I get a tool, it's like it's there. I play with it. I start making mistakes with it on purpose to see like where it goes wrong, and I still have my X-Carve. I'm going to start digging into it this week. I'm really sorry that I haven't gotten to it sooner, but since my West Coast trip, my whole life has been just one big to-do list, and I'm just literally knocking things off the list a little bit at a time. But the idea of playing with these new machines, like the new 3D printers and the CNC machines, and even if it's like liquid rubber or the whole smooth cast lineup of products that I use on a regular basis. It's just keeping the playfulness and having fun with that is really important. Keeping that childlike curiosity alive. And actually, so I can identify with one thing this week. A fan from Switzerland sent me an Arduino already pre-programmed with 2 servos and an accelerometer attached to it. And he wrote me a note and said, "What's your mailing address? I have a present for you." And I opened this thing up, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna take the advice I told my dad. Don't worry, you can't break the computer." And so I was like, "Okay, let's just assume this is like an iPod, and I can't break it." So I plugged it in. I had a Mophie, so I plugged in the USB port that's attached to it. It's literally hardwired to it. And then these things started wiggling and moving, but I don't know what was making it move. So it was almost funny to me. I'm like, okay, something in this is making these servos react. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I kept moving the accelerometer around, but I was moving it at a diagonal, which was making both of them move. And then I realized after a few minutes, if I move it in one physical, like XY motion and XY, it would make one or the other move. So he had it programmed in a way which took me a few minutes to figure out. And so now I basically have the skeleton of an invention without the invention. So now I have to go back and like hang an invention on this, and which was so nice of this guy. I have his name on the envelope, to send me this thing, and just basically like he can tell from my videos that playfulness is sort of intuitive with me. So he's like, "Here you go, have fun." So when I wrote to him, I was like, what exactly? Because I had it plugged into the Mophie, but he said a Mophie wouldn't be strong enough. Just plug it straight into the wall. And then once I plugged it into the wall, I got a much better reaction out of it. So, so keeping that childhood thing is, how do we do that? How do we keep that alive? And what do we do? What do we play with? Bob, any thoughts on this before I talk too long?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have kind of a, I guess a different advantage here because I'm surrounded by kids all the time. So
Yeah.
I would say that is an advantage in keeping the playfulness in my just kind of how I approach stuff. One, because so 4 kids, they all have very different personalities. They all do things in a different way. They all have different interests. And they're all interested in making things in certain ways. My third youngest is named Hawk, and he can make and wants to make anything out of anything. So he's the kid that, we have our recycle bin, and we put things in the recycle bin that are not dangerous. So we, put glass or anything in there, but everything else goes in there. So he starts there. He goes to the recycle bin and he finds cardboard, egg, cartons, whatever he can find, and starts taping them together and making stuff out of it.
That's great.
And he's actually in the way that he does that is a pretty big inspiration for me, because he's not looking for, I want to make this certain thing this certain way, and if I don't make it this certain way, it's not going to work. That's the thing, that
he's just looking for opportunities.
Right. He's looking at materials and saying, what can I do with these materials? And that's like totally opposite of what we often do in the shop. We go in and we say, I want to make this shelf, and it has to use this type of joinery, and it has to have this type of finish, and I have to get the items to make that happen. And if it doesn't happen how I want it to, then it's, incomplete, or it has to be redone or whatever. He's totally the opposite direction, where he's like, what can I make out of 2 cardboard boxes and, a paper towel tube, and the things that he sees in those that he makes are mind blowing. This is a laser gun rocket spaghetti shooter, stuff like that. It's just like,
I want one of those.
He's in a totally different, spectrum. So I have the advantage there of being able to watch him and my other kids too in their own ways. Just play, like they're making as the kind of evidence of their play versus the other way around. And that's pretty awesome. Also, I this past week I did kind of a text interview, like an email interview with a lady that I met in Chicago, and she runs a website called themakermom.com, and she does a lot of like STEM stuff, getting kids interested in technology and all this stuff. Anyway, it was a interview for Father's Day, and one of the questions that she had on there was, how would you convince or help a father with no making experience who wants to make stuff with their kids? Like, how would you tell them to go about getting started? And that was actually kind of tough for me to answer, because it's just, I'm not that person. I'm the one that's already doing it, trying to figure out how to get my kids to do it. And the thing I kind of landed on was that the kids are always going to have the better ideas for exactly what you said, Jimmy. They're the ones that don't have like the realism shoved down their throat for 20, 30 years. They're always going to have the better ideas. So my advice was to talk to the kid, find out what they want to do, and then figure out how to make that realistic.
Right.
And
How do you make a spaghetti shooter?
exactly, you know,
So
yeah,
the father
not
with no making experience, he could literally pick up a handful of spaghetti and just throw it at the wall. But then he could also work backwards and put it in a slingshot. Figure out,
yeah.
And
So-
that doing that with a kid would be incredibly fun.
Yeah. So I think there's a big opportunity there to just look at, even if you don't have kids, I mean, just to look at things from that perspective. Like, what do I want to do? And then work, reverse engineer that idea rather than,
that reminds me of a time when I was, so I was in my senior year at the School of Visual Arts in 1980, 89. And I took a little class called Toys and Games. And I had no idea what to expect. I'm like, oh, I like playing with stuff. And that decision literally changed the next 20 years of my life because I met Mark Setta Ducati, who was my teacher at the time in that class. And one of the first days, Mark actually went on to become a good friend of mine, and I talk about him in some interviews. Mark's a magic inventor, and he's invented a lot of magic products and also a lot of just regular toys. And one of the first days in class, he came in with big shopping bags, and he said, okay, everybody push all the tables together. And we pushed all the desks together to make a big island in the middle of the room. And he just dumped out these 2 shopping bags. And in the shopping bags were plastic tubes, popoid arms, balls, plastic cubes, all kinds of stuff, bottle caps. And then he popped out like 5 hot glue guns and said, everybody, you got 2 hours to invent a product. And we just went to town. And it was so much fun. Like that moment, I remember that moment as like being pivotal I was like, oh, wow, a pile of junk. I mean, I kind of knew it, but he just basically just put a light on it and said, this chaos, there's endless amounts of ideas, good, on the spectrum of horrible to very good. Find them within this pile of junk. And, and the limitations are your own limitations that you put on, your own inhibitions and stuff. But if you could just be playful and have fun with it, hot glue things together and try and come up with stuff. And, by the end of the 2 hours, there wasn't any real groundbreaking inventions, but we had a lot of fun. And, what is this? Kids came up with perverted things because we were all college students, some practical things, some stupid little games. But that in and of itself is basically the reason why my shop is such a mess. I mean, that particular day, I always think to myself, the visual associations you make when you just look at a pile of junk is hard to predict. And so when this is leaning next to that, and then you see a piece of plastic next to a piece of metal, and you go, oh, I can make something that's metal and plastic. Whatever the problem that needs to be solved that day. And, if you leave your mind free and easy enough to be able to play with those ideas. And, my bar cart video this week, I literally knew that I wanted to put something as a handle holder. I thought about, welding up a piece of steel at an angle, and I thought about a couple of things. I could try this, I could try that. And then I'm like, I got 600 old wrenches laying around. Why don't I just cut one in half and have that be like the 2 hands that hold the bar? And so I came up with that idea. It didn't seem so brand new to me, but I'm like, you know what? Let me go. It just seems right. And then when I saw that S-shaped wrench, I was like, oh, wow. And one thing that was playful and fun for me was like, oh, wow, this is an S-shaped wrench. One thing that I didn't realize, aside from the fact that both ends are 2 different sizes, it was completely symmetrical object. You cut it in half and you have the exact same shape twice. And that was like it's so stupid. But like when I made that discovery, I looked at it, off camera. I just stared at it for a second and I'm like, oh, wow, this is a completely symmetrical product. If I cut it right in the middle, I'm going to have 2 exactly the same shapes. And so that's why on camera you see me cut it in half and then I hold it up. It was a little off. I obviously grinded it so that they were both the same length. And then when I welded it to the cart, one mouth was wider than the other. But, I didn't want to get hung up on that. I didn't want to say, oh, the bar has like more airspace here than it does there. It doesn't matter. I think the idea of just using a wrench to me seemed more fun and more playful. So I just went with it. And so, I mean, that's how like these thoughts and practices manifest themselves, that you could see within my videos. And so you just got to keep looking at the chaos and try and find the product in there.
I really like that. So many times I'll hear other people say that I'm just not a creative person and I'm not good with design and coming up with ideas. But play can lead to a lot of creativity, which then leads to happiness. I mean, it just goes back to our previous episodes of what makes you happy and being creative. I think it all starts with play.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I think there's a big part of it too, is at least for me, like I've said before, I'm very much a function over form person. And so a lot of the things that I do, I think of them very from like a utility perspective. It has to function. It has to do what it's supposed to do. And the tendency can be, if you just have a lot of work to do, the tendency can be for me to just get those things functional and just move from one thing to the next and be functional and whatever. But I'm trying in the last couple of months to leave some space in my project schedule for some stuff that has no function. That's just like, it's purely for the sake of doing I don't want to spoil what I'm working on, but for doing this thing that has no use other than owning one of these things. It's kind of like the arcade that I've talked about doing. There's no reason that I need to build that arcade. I'm not selling it. I'm not going to do anything like that. But it's just one of those that it's a toy. It's a gigantic toy. And if I can make time in my schedule, which I haven't done yet, to spend time making something that's of no real use, then it's gonna do me good in a lot of ways. So, even though we often have to just make stuff to get it out the door to make the money to survive, it's probably a good idea to schedule in some time that's just for the sake of, making something that's useless.
I tell my students every semester, I said, don't wait to hang something on an assignment. The teachers are all going to give you something to do, whether it's design a package for this or, develop a corporate identity for that. But if you have the impulse to make a lamp out of paper mache, just do it. Don't even like wait and don't say, oh, well, that doesn't fit into me being a graphic designer. That's how you develop your playfulness, your inventiveness, and your skills, on top of all, and your ability to kind of think outside the box. So I always tell my students, if you have, say, for instance, you have 20 assignments due in a semester, make 30 or 40 things, physical things, so that by the end of the semester, you have just that much more knowledge and it'll just make your development so much more rich and so much more fruitful ultimately in the end. I see so many students, they just sit around and they just wait to be told what to do. And of course, the world's full of different types of personalities. And those are the people that'll just get like a regular 9-to-5 job. And then you see the people that are more aggressive and that are like, oh, I can't wait to figure out this material. And, they're talking about different types of artists that inspire them, so I encourage them all to be on, the other side of the spectrum, where you're constantly being inspired and playful and inventing things. And I also tell my students too, don't underestimate the fact that you're all inventors. Even if you're just coming up with invented images, I said you're all inventing new things. So, you're inventing a way to take a photograph. You're inventing the composition of that photograph or that film or that motion graphic or that logo, corporate identity. So, if you think of yourself as an inventor in that way, you begin to really kind of break outside the idea of just doing graphics. Because I say that as an example because the majority of my students are graphic designers, but a lot of them go on to be makers, in the true sense of the word. But so yeah, I told you guys I had the opportunity to teach high school students this year, and I just really had a wonderful experience yesterday. I got to watch my students, so Danny's students, who I go and I consult with, they each one had to do their presentation to the sharks. They did like a Shark Tank type of pitch of their product and their corporate development. And so just to back up, the students each got there were teams. There were 6 teams, and each one of the teams had several students on it, maybe up to 5 students. And they had to come up with a corporate ID. They had to come up with a corporate intellectual property, and they had to develop the product and the pitch and the marketing and everything. And so they each went up with corporate identity, with branding and everything, and the product, of course, which involved a lot of electronics. But they were wonderful inventions. Each one of them, in their own right, could be a real product, and they are a real product. It's just obviously not on the market yet. But putting the kids through that exercise, which was Danny Aviv's brainchild, I thought was amazing because the kids got so much out of it. They got the time to be playful in the beginning, but then once they started going down certain roads, they had to kind of narrow and focus these inventions. But they're in high school, so they have the time to play and continue to play.
Yeah, that's something too.
It was fun.
This is totally just because you said high school. I think. I don't know how we would do this as a society, but I think it would be amazing if we could somehow make high school students understand the awesome opportunity that they have. Because, they're in a position to where most of their needs are being met. They have generally more freedom than they're ever going to have for the rest of their lives. They have fewer responsibilities. They have, kind of disposable income probably if they have like a part-time job or something. And they spend 7 or 8 hours a day in a place that's just focused on teaching them stuff. And if we could somehow make them understand like how incredible that is, could you imagine if us as adults, as where we are in life right now, somebody was taking care of all that stuff for us and we just got to spend 8 hours a day learning? Oh my gosh, what in the world? That'd be so awesome. But I mean, I as a teenager, I know that there's no way we're going to be able to make them fully understand the opportunity there. But
there'll be a time when you can hop on a time machine and you could take them to the Ghost of Christmas Future and the Ghost of Christmas Past.
There you go.
You could say, here, remember when you were an infant? Now here, look, here you're a 45-year-old, whoever or whatever, and these are the things that you wish you should have done. So.
Yeah.
But until the time machine exists, we just have to use our imagination.
Something that I noticed whenever Jimmy's not talking, Jimmy is playing with something. So he's either got a knife in his hand that he's playing with, or a little bit ago it was like a looks like a litter to something, and then you're playing with your hair.
Taylor was here. She was playing with the lid of a. Well, she wasn't playing with it. I'm playing with it now. It's the lid of a yogurt. So, and it's made out of polypropylene. So it's funny because you could snap it inside out. Look, it's different shapes now. See that?
I love that. Yeah, I see the kid in you whenever you're not talking. You have to, you have to be doing something.
You're playing while we're recording.
Yeah.
So
that used to drive my dad crazy. And when we were kids, whenever we had like a family meeting, I was always playing with something, and my dad would walk over and snatch it out of my hands and slap it on the table.
Yeah, I probably do that too.
But that being said, I am who I am because of my dad, because he also is the one who put chisels in my hand and hammers and let me play with a bandsaw as an infant, so.
As an infant.
Yeah.
So that's where you picked up these techniques that people complain about in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad.
Using it as an infant with like no motor skills, you're just like, yeah. Another thing I was thinking about in regards to this topic is just, and we've talked about this in regards to failure before a couple of times, but just expectations. If your expectation of your work, no matter what that work is, if your expectation is perfection, then you're almost doomed to not be happy with what you're doing, with how it comes out.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of works into, so say you're at a point where you're trying to come up with an idea for a project. You want to make something for your house or a video or whatever the case may be. If you start with the expectation of this thing has to serve a certain function, or this thing has to produce a certain amount of money, or you're setting your expectation really hard up front, then you're not going to look at the process and you're not going to look at the outcome in the same way as if you're starting out with like, I really want to figure out how to do a thing, or I really want to make a thing that makes me enjoy being outside, or makes me enjoy being in the shop, or whatever the case is. So I think by setting your expectations really hard up front, you might be doing yourself a disservice and like kind of boxing yourself in. But if you can kind of offset some of those expectations, just be Jimmy's playing with stuff again.
I love it.
Magnifying glass.
Yeah, but you can, offset some of those expectations and give yourself some freedom. I think that is a good thing.
Well, that's what I tell my students all the time, and I have the philosophy of like, you know what? I'm kind of like stalled on getting started on a project because I can't find like the right path, or I don't have a clear, solid idea. I get started and then I make it. And if it's something that doesn't come out the way I want, I learn all the things I need to change when I make it the first time, and then I make it again. Like the assignment that I give my students each year is to bookbind, and bookbinding is very difficult if you've never done it before. And literally, I'm starting to see that. When I first started teaching 20 years ago, everybody learned how to use an X-Acto knife and a T-square. Now there's no reason for kids to use an X-Acto knife and a T-square. So when it comes time to actually cut a book cover, they don't even understand what a right angle is. So I try and give that simple lesson of, this is a T-square, this is a right angle, this is the way you use a razor blade. And so the books come and, every one of them looks like they're from the Stone Age. Occasionally someone gets it right the first time and it looks really good. But they all seem so defeated. And I'm like, please don't, this is the first time you've ever done it. You got to just do it again. Do it again, do it again. The guy that pitches a fastball, he didn't pitch a 90-mile-an-hour fastball the first time he threw a ball. When you see someone play a guitar, they've never done that before for the very first time. There's very few people that could do these things really good the first time. So just keep a an open, playful mind and say, oh, let me see the mistakes I made, see if I can use those mistakes to my advantage, see if I can actually use any of these mistakes to something that becomes like a new product all in on or a new, corporate identity all on its own. So I try and tell my students to look for those opportunities, in their infancy when it comes to, say, for instance, bookbinding, which is, a complicated thing. So if you mess it up the first time, do it again and again and again and again. And that's how you get good at anything, is repetition.
Never stop playing.
Yeah, that's it. Now, keep having fun and, learn how to cut a straight line in the process. If you can.
And kind of with that, like, I know I always mention Legos. I don't always, but I have mentioned Legos several times. But I sincerely think that it's one of those things that even a grown-up without kids should, on occasion, have a box of Legos and just sit down and like just play with them.
We have a bag of Legos in the workshop.
Yeah, I think it's a great, just, even if it's totally mindless and you're not trying to produce you're not trying to make a building or not trying to make a spaceship or whatever. Just the act of like fiddling with them and sticking them together, it just gets your hands and your head in a different place than what you're used to doing. And so, if you don't want to go waste a bunch of money on them, you can go to thrift stores and usually find bags of Legos. Just disinfect them, and then you're good to go. But
live dangerously, don't disinfect them.
Oh, there you go. Play with danger. No,
I'm going to order Legos off of Amazon right now because I think that's such a brilliant idea. One more thing on my desk for me to fidget with and play with.
Yeah,
you guys are gonna laugh. Right in my backpack now, I have one Lego, one cube that I took from Make a Faire last year in New York. I found it on the desk. I have one red cube. And every time I see it, I'm like, there's nothing to stick it onto. It's just one alone. I'm like, that'll lead to something. So it's still in my backpack.
Don't step on it.
Yeah, that's why I keep it in the backpack.
Yeah, but I would suggest everybody have, even just like a small package of them and just like put them on your desk, fiddle with them when you're watching TV or doing something else. And anything else like that. Rubik's Cube is another good thing that even if you don't know how to solve it, when you start turning one enough times, you start to see patterns. Like, I can move this thing to this position, even if it doesn't help you solve it, doesn't, actually make any progress. You start to understand that like a path can set, A to B. And if you fiddle with it long enough, then you're going to start be able to do things on purpose. And stuff like that, I think can like carry over into, your actual work and your actual projects, I think. I've got this thing, and I don't even know what it's called. I'll see if I can put it in the show notes. My brother sent it to me for Christmas, and it's like there's 4 different geometric shapes, and there's like a pyramid, kind of cube, a rhombus, and some crazy trapezoidal thingy. And there's like 20 of them, and if you fit them all together, they make a sphere. But only if you get them all in the right position, and they're all magnetic, so they all stick together. So you can make whatever crazy shape you want to. But if you can get them aligned correctly, then you can actually make, you can be intentional about what the shape is. But it's one of those things that if I wasn't careful, I could sit here and play with for an entire day. And, nothing useful would come out of it, except I would be trying to solve an unknown problem for a long time, which I think is really good,
Mental exercise is extremely important. And solving useless problems is part of that. It's part of that exercise, like trying to put this puzzle back together. Yeah, for sure.
I'm looking at Legos right now, and the ages on there, it says ages 4 to 99.
Yep.
I don't understand that. Like, what happens when you turn 100? You can't play with Legos anymore?
Well, your vision is just so bad that it's
okay, that makes sense.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. We just offended our 100 plus listeners.
Oh yeah. They're a big part of our demographic, so that's going to be a problem. Yeah. Well, you guys got any other thoughts on playfulness?
Well, I would just say, if I can offer any advice to listeners, and it's just you said when somebody asked you how a father who has no experience making things could encourage kids to make things, and that's the reason why I brought up my first day of toys and games class, where the teacher came in with bags of junk. Just like you said, just dump out the recycle bin. Kids love cardboard tubes. You could even make cardboard tubes by rolling up paper, and just arts and crafts to get kids going. And if you don't have the experience of making things, and just start playing with arts and crafts, paper and tape. I mean, think of all the things you could make with a roll of, masking tape and a newspaper.
Yeah. Like I said a couple weeks ago, my kids got into the making art thing, and so now it's every day it's pom-poms and googly eyes and, popsicle sticks and glue, lots and lots of glue. So, yeah. But even, doing that with your kids, even if there's no kind of purpose, no goal to it, is huge. Oh, another thing, this is not a product placement thing. It's just something that I get a hold of this weekend, and it's called Maker Kits. I'll put it in the show notes. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically, it's a system of pieces that connect together, and the idea is that you use paper towel rolls and boxes and stuff like that as the structure, but you use these things.
Oh, as the connectors?
Yeah, as the connectors and as axles and as gears.
Oh, cool.
And so it gives you like the components to wrap around, kind of stuff you have around the house. But you can, and actually there's a picture on my Instagram. My son made a box with like a pasta box or something, but it's got a winch, like an arm coming off the front of it with a little thing that you can turn, and it winches up a hook. And this is all just out of this little kit, so even if you need some components like that to help you kind of visualize, that type of play, that's a pretty inexpensive little toy kit to help you do that and take advantage of the stuff in the recycling bin. I'll put it in the show notes. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but another point is always keep a hot glue gun plugged in. Just if you want to just glue something to something else, and all of a sudden you have like a new object. Just do mashups. That's another really good way to keep your playfulness going. Is just do physical mashups. Hot glue one thing to another thing. You could always take it apart if you needed to, but just having hot glue always ready, because if you have an impulse, you're like, oh, this would look cool there. And then all of a sudden you glue this to that, and you're like, oh, that gives me this idea. And it gives you the idea to just keep playing.
Also, don't give yourself too many options. So don't, if you have a huge shop and you've got wood and tools and supplies everywhere, don't think of how you can use everything. Just limit yourself to a few things. I do this when I go out and shoot photography. Like, I'm only going to take this lens. I'm going to leave all the other lenses at home, and I'm limited to just this. And that forces me to be creative with what I have. So limitations. Yeah.
Speaking of lenses and cameras, this is totally off topic, but I was thinking about it earlier. Have you started shooting anything with your new cameras, Jimmy? And if so, has that changed the way that you have been filming stuff?
Well, I've been keeping my 7100 that I got from David on the tripod, and I shot the whole Leatherman thing is shot on it. So there's like a lot of intimate thing, and I kind of like the idea of kind of looking for the focus. So that's in there too. Not to get too what is that other channel that I don't like?
Vimeo.
To Vimeo.
Not to get too Vimeo on everybody, because I'm not photographing the dust intentionally, but I am doing like soft focus on some stuff only because the lens is really tight. And I like that. So I'm getting into that kind of look. And then on the bar card video, I mixed it towards like the second half of the video. I just had that camera set up for the other shoot I was doing, so I just started using it. So you'll see it's mixed in the bar card video. And you could tell because the colors are all really off. I didn't have the white balance set correctly. So I try to color correct it. And so it gets a little funky if you're like really off. It's really hard to bring it back to where it's supposed to be. Yeah. So you could tell like where I'm starting to grab the wheels. And then, of course, some of the lathing stuff is all done with the 7100, which I'm loving it. I'm really, really excited to use it.
Awesome.
Has it changed how you look at making the videos at all? Like just having the different capability?
I mean, I just, one thing I was missing and lacking is the intimacy of like really getting into a shot. I mean, I love the wide angle, and I use it, like I probably overuse the wide angle on my Canon. I have the little Canon Vixia Mini X, which is basically like a GoPro with a screen on it. So I kind of overuse that, but that's because it's easy. And but there's sometimes when I think I'm up on the product enough, and then I look at it and it's out of focus because I'm too close to it. But so just having the intimacy with the zoom lenses is fun. Is really cool. So the Leatherman was a perfect project because the Leatherman basically fills the screen the entire time. And that's, I'm always considering that little square, whether it's small or big. And when you watch the Leatherman video on a big screen, it looks pretty good.
Nice.
Looks really cool. So,
well, I want to hear what we're all watching. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to Ed McNeil, Kirk Frey, I'm so bad with names. Why do I have to do the last names? Anyway, those guys gave us donations this week, and I'm really grateful to them and Luis Gonzalez, Jeremy Paulin, Jeremy White, and Juan Vargas from Patreon. They're
Thank you, guys.
our top supporters over there. Awesome guys. And everybody at a Patreon that supports us, really amazing. Also want to thank our sponsor for this week, Inventables. Go check them out if you don't already know about Inventables. Inventables.com. They're great people as well. So before we go, where can we find out about everybody and what are we watching? David.
You can find me at drunkenwoodworker.com, and my channel suggestion this week is Crimson Custom Guitars.
Ooh.
This guy, you don't have to be a guitar maker to enjoy this channel. If you're a woodworker, you're going to get a lot of awesome tips. And it's just, there's some really awesome, creative, playful things going on in this channel. Like right now, it's a multi-part series, but he's taking a guitar kit that you can get for like $150, and it comes with all the pieces, and basically you just put it together. But he's taking a cheap guitar kit and making it great. And so he added like a maple veneer over the top, and he's strengthening some things. And then if you're a musician, you might know what a K-oscillator is. It's just kind of like a noisy little thing that you can play with your finger. He's building it into the guitar. And
sweet.
That is so cool. So
that is cool.
Crimson Custom Guitars. Good, fun channel.
The guy that, before we go on to Jimmy, the guy, I can't remember his name, Matt something from Muse, the band Muse.
Mm-hmm.
He's always had those things, those K-oscillators and chaos pads built into his guitar. And there's this one guy, I'll have to find the guy that makes his guitars. It's amazing the type of electronics that this guy shoves inside guitars that are still playable. But it's kind of like that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool. I've been a longtime fan of Blazing Nail Gun, aka redneckdiy.com, but his YouTube channel is Blazing Nail Gun, BLAZINGNAILGUN, Blazing Nail Gun. And it's Freddie. And Dave, you featured him when he made the vintage pulley, didn't you? Feature him once a few weeks back?
Yeah, what a crazy, awesome project. Like no one would ever think to make that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in Easton, Tennessee. I found him because I was watching him build his barn about a year ago, and then we started talking, and he's a super nice guy. And so I'm watching him, and I'd like to give my plug this week to my sister Kathleen, who's a jewelry designer, Kathleen Diresta online, or K Diresta Designs, and she's in Seacliff, Long Island. So you can actually walk into her shop in Seacliff if anybody lives in Long Island.
Nice.
So, and then you can Google just Diresta. You'll find out about both of us.
Well, for me, I've been watching a lot of this guy named James. I can't remember his last name. But his channel is X Robots, and he's in England, and he does these like crazy suits and robots, and he's like, I don't know if anybody saw the newest Avengers movie, but there's an Iron Man suit that's called the Hulkbuster armor, and it's this gigantic Hulk-sized Iron Man armor, and this guy's making one.
I just opened up, and that's where you heard the intro. It's cool.
That he can get into, and it's like all, it's 3D printed panels and these foam panels, and it's all weathered and painted, and there's electronics in it. I mean, it's a huge undertaking. And I think the newest video is like part 32 or something. It's like a lot of video stuff.
Is he 3D printing all this stuff? This is insane.
Not all of it, but a lot of the pieces, a lot of the framework. One of the things that he's working on right now that I'm really into is it's not R2-D2, but it's another one of the R2 droids from Star Wars that I won't...
The square head.
Yeah, I won't like geek out and explain exactly who it is or anything. But he's 3D printing the frame for that entire, life-size robot. And he's printing it in sections and gluing it all together. It's all remote control servos in the legs and in the head. And
R6 droid.
Yeah, it's amazing. He does some really cool stuff. So if you guys are interested in electronics or, kind of big costuming or robotics or stuff like that,
really cool.
Check him out. So,
and then just one more thing. Did you guys ever see the movie I saw it this week, Print the Icon? It's the whole story behind it. It's an old movie now. It's on Netflix. It's called Print the Icon. It's the whole entire history of MakerBot up until a year ago.
I've seen Print the Legend. Is that?
That's probably what it is.
Printing the Legend.
Yeah, that's probably, I knew I had it wrong. Yeah, that's an incredible movie. I just saw it. So if anybody hasn't seen that, you guys I'm still living in the 90s. I'm sorry.
You watched
You
it on
guys are like,
VHS.
yeah. What are you talking about? We saw that.
No,
Yeah.
it's a fun documentary to see the rise and fall. So good stuff.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that'll do it for this week. I want to say, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there listening. So
Yes.
I know I get emails from a lot of you guys and talking about that you enjoy listening to this while you're in the shop or doing stuff with your kids. And so that's awesome. So I'm glad for that. And happy Father's Day to all of our fathers.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And happy Father's Day to you.
Oh, thank you. Cool. Well, that's it for this week. See you guys next time.
Later on.